Thank you. So now we have our moderator and panelist with us on the stage. And I hand over the proceedings to moderator Mr. P. Dwarkanath, please.
Good morning to everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
Distinguished fellow panelists and distinguished delegates. As you know, I come from Delhi. In Delhi, the delegates wait for the speakers. In Mumbai, we're waiting for delegates to come. So please bear with us for a few minutes if people keep walking in. But we will start the proceedings now. To start with, let me compliment NHRD and the Summit Director Pankaj Bansal for setting up this agenda, which is very apt, relevant and contextual. I think it's important if you see the theme, journey from efficiencies to experience. Yesterday, you heard two CEOs sharing their experiences and talking about anecdotes and sharing their experience as well as from life and how to deal with various key stakeholders, including their bosses and managers. I think today's session, we focus specifically on leveraging technology and HR, intelligence for decision making. I think it can use it for many purposes, but for intelligence for decision making. I think here I would like to give a context. As the saying goes, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Who has said it, sir? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Peter Drucker has said it many years ago. It still holds good. What does it mean? I think when you want to adopt, change, it's important that you need to have that mindset. And who gives that mindset? Who drives that mindset? How do you change with times? How do you cope up with change? Whenever there is a change, there is always some resistance, apprehensions, or what will happen to me, or what will happen to the organization? Does it really work? Or is it one of those key buzzwords which we're trying to bring in? Or is it something very relevant which can be useful? Will it help us? Especially for HR. For many years, we were not understanding what business requires, but now we've become very professional. And we also realize it's important for HR, if you want to really contribute strategically as a business partner in order to get the HR value proposition to the business, it's important that you need to use the technology to your advantage while driving the people's decisions which can help the business. I think here I would like to comment on one thing. As is always we say, HR is just not a science, but art and a science. I think you all agree. I'm not saying just don't become just in this digital era, just don't just press buttons, A plus B is equal to C, that's what the technology tells me, I will do it. It's not that. Again, as you know, in any people's decision, all these are enablers. You use an assessment tool, you do a 360, you do a performance evaluation by using many methods and assessments. Ultimately, what it matters is the judgment of the human being. You take a call. That's why I always say in people decisions, you can never be 10 out of 10. It's because there is an element of subjectivity, but that is where the art comes in. How do you apply? In the same panel, if you use certain tools, you arrive at certain conclusions, but based on that, you have to take a call. So use technology intelligently to your advantage, both for the organization and for the HR. I think, when you say technology, it will be very interesting to see. I see Harish is sitting here, and we started way back when HR competency model was started, which Bangalore, some of my colleagues from Bangalore have driven it earlier. Now Pankaj, Arvind Agarwal and others are doing, Vidhi and so on. Even Wave Brokebank and Dave Ulrich, who have developed this concept of HR competencies for more than 15 years, you will find when they have They have assigned 5 key competencies. This is, I'm talking about 2006. They developed it further after 4-5 years research when collected huge data globally, especially from Asia, including India, where NHRD has been the co-partner in collecting the data twice. They've identified 5 key competencies. First, strategic focus. It goes without saying you need to be strategic. I think for using technology also you need to be strategic. HR delivery. Deliver what you promise in terms of systems, processes. I think, if you don't keep scoring, you're just practicing. Number 3, personal credibility. Number 4, we talked about credibility yesterday. Number 4, business knowledge. I think, if you want to use the technology to advantage, it's not just for people process, which should have an impact in terms of efficiency, productivity, and taking a effective decision making. Last but not the least, that's what you may be surprised. It said sometime about 10 years back now, 10 to 11 years, techie savvy. I think is not something new which we are saying. And so I would also like to mention here, this is my view, is nothing to do with Gen Y alone. I think technology is important for any HR, for any business manager. It's only a question of using it to your advantage, both in terms of with respect to your organization as well as people, and how do you drive it. So there is a change. When there is a change, how do you manage the change is where we have to do it. So if you leverage it to your advantage, it will become both art and a science. If you don't do it, then you will be wasting your time and efforts and it will not give delivery. So with this introduction, without talking much, I would like to say we have 2 distinguished panelists here who belong to, I would say, Gen Y, who understands the technology with reference to people-related practices, and both have got a very strong orientation towards people practices. Shelly Singh, she is the co-founder of People Strong and Chief Business Officer. Apart from working as a practicing HR manager for Who's Software and others, now she's on the other side of the business. She's a service provider for all this. So she would be able to give this perspective, apart from a huge experience in HR, how it can be helpful, how you can leverage to arrive at intelligent decisions. On the other hand, you have another veteran in terms of gaining experience of more than nearly 20 years, Jodhajit Das, who is the Chief CHRO of ICICI Prudential, which is one of the biggest, perhaps the biggest life insurance company in India, and he runs the people practices. And incidentally, he also heads the, I think it's very important, I see it many places, HR heading the technology and infrastructure, especially I see in the life insurance businesses and other businesses. So I think he not only heads the people processes as a CHRO, but also heads the infrastructure and technology. So I think businesses also have started realizing this is not something which should be given only to someone who is an expert in technology. Even HR can run that business, because ultimately if you see the service industry, especially be it in healthcare, be it in life insurance businesses, which I am associated with as well, it's more people. So I think it's important that you have to see that there is an opportunity for HR to widen their area of scope and operations, apart from getting into CSR and board management and governance and nomination and remuneration committee, which was never seen as part of HR, but slowly seen in many cases it become part of the HR. So I think it is not something which is a rocket science, which is easily achievable, provided we have the will to do, and it's a key competency for HR, as I said earlier, and now which Dave Aldrich have further modified and developed it. They said technology, earlier techie savvy, they said HR technology. So I think that is what it is. So to start with, Shelly Singh will make a PowerPoint presentation for 15 to 20 minutes, followed by Mr. Das, who will talk extempore, and he will share his experiences from ICICI. And after hearing both of us, I have few questions to them. After that, it's open to all of you. With these few words, thank you very much for your patient hearing. Now, may I ask Shelly? Huh? Okay, sorry. I'm fine, please. Carry on. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah. I hope all of us had a cup of coffee. And I believe it was a wonderful day yesterday with lots of rich learning. And so I'm looking very excitedly to this session and sharing thoughts and my thoughts. And particularly, we would invite a lot of questions and challenges from all of you. Before I start, I would like to thank NHRDN and People Strong, particularly Pankaj Bansal as the Chief Convener of the Summit. It's a privilege to be here. This summit is being organized for quite a few years now. I think I've been here at least twice earlier. And it's wonderful how this movement is taking shape and how we are discussing how technology can be leveraged for intelligent decision making. I think that's a very important point. So I want to spend some time talking about that. It's also a deep honor and privilege for me to be with eminent professionals. Mr. Dwarkanath, whom I have the deepest regard for and who's shaped the way HR thinking has evolved in the country for many years now, a veteran HR professional, and Shelly Singh, of course, with whom I have the privilege of working, because People Strong is a partner whom we worked with, and we've had wonderful experience with them. So, privilege and an honor to be here. Before I start, I think I want to take the quote from Mr. Dwarkanath's what he mentioned about culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And he alluded to the point why HR and technology infrastructure could be together. I think fundamentally, one of the issues with technology is always adoption. So in the thinking we had, at least in the thinking of my CEO, because ultimately the CEO decides the organization structure, the biggest impediment to technology adoption is the refusal or the resistance to do new ways of doing things, right? And that is where the culture change becomes so important, and culture change is really what HR does for a living. Because fundamentally in a dynamic world, we are constantly living with evolution in terms of technology and evolution in terms of whatever changes that are happening in the economy, right? And therefore it's absolutely imperative that what worked earlier or what was good earlier is no longer relevant in today's context. So the need for everybody to keep changing and keep adopting and keep evolving is so very important, especially in the context of shorter cycle times today, right? So that is the larger context where while technology is a service and HR's primary role is also to deliver service, but also the fact that technology is also about adoption, and therefore there is that element of culture change. And fundamentally, I think if you ask my boss, he'll say strategy is all about having the right culture, right? I mean, there are choices to be made, of course, but in terms of where do you do resource allocation. But fundamentally, if you don't have the right culture, boss, you're not going to be able to make those right allocations in terms of capital or resources to make sure that you get to the market leadership that you are seeking. So having said that, what I thought is, I'll invite you to ask me questions and pause me. So let's make it interactive. So if you think that I've said something which you don't think is needs to be challenged, or you want to add to it or substantiate to it, please feel free to just raise a question so that we can make it a bit more interactive rather than a monologue. So I'd request you to participate as I'm speaking, and of course there is a question answer session at the end of it where we can also pick it up. So part of my talk is really going to be just quickly going through the evolution of how HR has evolved in ICICI Prudential Life, because that's my only experience. I can't really talk about other organizations. This is my 15th year with ICICI Prudential, so one of the limitations I will always have is I know what's happening in my business, but I don't really know what's happening in other organizations. And how we have tried to embrace, I won't say we are there in everywhere, of course we are not. We've had many successes, we have also had many challenges, pitfalls, failures. So I'm going to talk through some of those also, because that might be meaningful for anybody looking at any learning or from this session itself. So let me put it in context. I think, so I'm going to go back to flashback 2003. ICICI Prudential, we started in the year 2000. Small company, life insurance got privatized, liberalized. Some players came in. LIC is the big daddy and continues to be the big daddy. We said that, okay, building blocks, we're growing slowly. So by 2003, we were there probably in 20-30 locations, maybe around a couple of thousand employees. I can't remember also. That's the time when we said we need a strong HRMS, right? And the decision was, the question was, do we take standalone modules for various HR processes, or you take an enterprise-wide system. I'm glad we took the decision to take an enterprise-wide system, and that was PeopleSoft. And we did the implementation. And I think that has been a very, very important decision for us, because my learning in the last 15 years that I've worked is that physical processes are the enemy of scale, right? If you want to scale an organization and you want to do it efficiently, physical processes really is the enemy of scale, right? So that's where technology really comes in. And if we had not implemented an HRMS in 2003, where we were just a couple of thousand people, in 2008 we were 35,000 people. We could not have achieved it. Impossible. From 20-30 locations, we were in 2,000 locations in the country. So this kind of rapid growth scale up to do without technology is impossible. So any organization which is looking at building scale and a scale as something that they are aspiring for necessarily has to think of eliminating physical processes and adopting technology. So that's the one point I would like to put. An analogy here is, I don't know, many of you, if you are from Bombay mostly, I would think, if you look at the ceiling that we have, right, there is always congestion, you know, near the toll booth, right? It's a brilliant ceiling, wide open spaces, right? But what happens is, there is always congestion at the toll because there is a person who's, there's physical exchange of money happening. Now if you replace that with, in a lot of Western countries, you have all these, whatever the technology is, where you can actually, you put a meter of some kind and it scans you and you pay the toll. Cars can whiz past. So the fundamental issue is, because you put a physical process, despite the fact that you have a highway, right, you're not able to go as fast as possible, and it's slowing down because there is a physical intermediate or a physical process in between, right? So that is one in our language what we call congestion. So the important thing about technology here is, how do you decongest, right? So technology can help in decongestion, and which is the point I'm making about physical processes being an enemy of scale. Having said that, I want to spend a bit more time talking about process itself. Now, you can create a complicated process and you want to automate it. The amount of money you spend on trying to create a complicated process and automating, and then you again after 2 years we find that we want to change the process itself. So the fundamental thing here to think about is, how do we make a process simple? So the one, again, learning that I've had over the last so many years is simplify, simplify, simplify. Whether it's policies, whether it's processes. The more complicated processes you have, right, and you want to automate that, not only are you incurring costs, but you are really creating an obnoxious system, if I were to use that word, right, which invariably fails. And I've had that experience with a recruitment system, right? 6 years it has taken us to get to a recruitment system because we had the most complicated recruitment process ever. So the important point is, I think that process simplification is the root of, before you even go on the technology journey. Because if you create complicated process and you want to automate it, well, you are a dead duck. So simplify, simplify, simplify. If you can simplify, what it means is you are eliminating, right? And wherever you can eliminate, you eliminate. After eliminating, right, yes, we now need to automate wherever possible, or in some cases outsource. The thing about outsourcing is about, not just about cost, because many times the decision on outsourcing is about, there is the cost arbitrage, but fundamentally for me, is it a core capability that I want to build in the organization? And do I really need my organizational resources to build capability in this area, right? And I'll come to HR processes later.